Hey there everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Wizards Build series. In the last 6 videos I went through all the different skills and we talked about how many skill points you want to put in them, what the skills actually do for the class, and just generally how to use them. In this video we're going to be putting that together, all that information together, and creating builds and setups for the Wizard class, as well as all this other stuff. There's a lot of theory in this video. This video is long, but if you want to really know how to create builds, what to do with your class, this is the video to watch. The next video I'm going to be doing, episode 8, is going to be talking about skill runes. This particular video I'm trying to do in a way which will continue over time, so I don't need to redo it at all. I'm not going to be mentioning skill runes, I'm just going to be mentioning the core skills, however including some of the benefits which skill runes can add for them. So this video, I want to make sure first as well, if you cannot read this, then please switch to a laptop or something where you can read this, because this is going to be more presentation style. I'm going to be showing some pictures and talking through stuff, but you're going to need to read this as we go through. I'm just going to be talking you through it. So the layout of this video, we're going to have 4 sections to this. The first section, just quickly going through generally how to set up your hotbar. That is the 10 hotkeys at the bottom. How to sort of set them up with skills in order to kind of optimally use these skills well. The next section we're going to go through, which is a longer section, we're going to be detailing what you actually want on the class for the different types of content, how many skill points you want to have in the different things in order to kind of use them well in the different bits of content, and so what to aim for in a build in terms of how many skill points overall you want in the different skills, talking about the kind of where you want to get to first of all, and then where you want to get to ultimately. That's what we're going to be going through there. The next section, we're going to be talking about the damage output, how the skills actually come into play together to achieve great damage output on the class, as well as defense. So which skills are very important for that, how you're going to be using them, creating builds with them, that kind of stuff. Section 2 and 3 are the really theory heavy sides of things. There are links in the description to skip to any particular section. If you don't want to learn all the details and really know the theory, then just skip to section 4. However, I would recommend obviously going through section 2 and 3. I just want to give all the information I can to help everyone understand what's going on. So section 4, we're actually going to be looking at how to set up a build on your class at different levels of skill points. The different kinds of builds you can create and that kind of thing. So jumping straight into section 1 here, we're going to talk about how to set up the skills on your hotbar. So here, these are a few options of PvE builds that I've got, which I'll go through later on in this video. As you can see, bar 1 here, this is where I like to put the long cooldown skills. So this is just my kind of personal recommendation. You don't have to do it like this, but I think this is the optimal way of how to set up these skills on your hotbar. So you could switch bar 1 and bar 2 to be the other way around. I like the buffs to be on bar 1, so they're right there when I enter, and then I switch to bar 2. But I can understand it would be annoying to always have to switch to bar 2 to start attacking. A lot of people like the attacking skills on bar 1. But anyway, so bar 1 we've got the long cooldown skills, buffs, and skills not needed in a rush. This essentially is basically pushing the focus to the other bar. So you have only one bar which you want to use, which you want to have there using skills from, and then the other bar you just quickly go to top up with buffs and use defense skills when you need more defense, that kind of thing. So as you can see here, they're all long cooldown skills, or skills that are just kind of buffs to your character that you just put on and then switch away from. That's the way I like to do that. Bar 2, you can see I've color coded here to show what I mean by the different things. So it's all the short cooldown skills, the kind of attacking skills, the spam skills, and then the ones which you want to use as a quick reaction to something. So the only quick reaction one I'm talking about here is Torrent. This is to kind of knock enemies back. You want to be able to use this in a rush, i.e. not having it on the other bar, where you need to quickly flick over, use it, and then flick back. You don't want that kind of situation happening. So you want it right there, ready, even if it is a longer cooldown skill. Then spam skills here. This is kind of your high damage general use skills that you just want to use as soon as they come off cooldown. So you want them there ready on the bar which you're sort of sitting on. So that's those there. the general kind of attack skills. So Mana Storm, I marked this as just an attack skill because it does less damage than these other ones. Like, it's kind of generally less useful. However, it's an attacking skill with like a slightly lower cooldown than these other ones. So you want to have it there just to kind of use when you're ready, when it's ready. And then short cooldown skills, you want these on the bar which you're sitting on because, you know, otherwise you're not going to be using them anywhere near as efficiently as you could be. So you put all low cooldown skills on there. So this is kind of general PvE builds that I'm going to go through later on in this video. Also to show, this is my preferred PvP build, which we're going to go through PvP builds later on again. But as you can see, exactly the same setup on here with the long cooldown skills, and then the shorter cooldown skills up at the top, quick spamming ones and stuff. Sorry to flick back, but I wanted to show here, this is another PvE build, and as you can see, I've changed Healing Fountain to Mimic here, but yeah, it's going to go on this bar because it's a long cooldown skill, and then we've got all the damage skills on the other one. So flicking forwards, now we've got farming builds. I'm actually not going to go through farming builds later on. This is the only bit where I'm talking about it, because it's quite a minor thing. So this is what I would say is the best farming setup here at the bottom, and it's including runes on these skills which are not listed here. So this kind of you want a rune on here which like increases the range, a rune on here which deals damage around you as you run, a rune on here which increases your move speed, and a rune on Drake which will damage where you place it. So you can kind of place it down onto some enemies or some barrels or something, and then it will destroy those barrels. So you can do that from range and round corners, as opposed to this one, which you've got to do directly, as well as being able to alternate between the two. I think it's important being able to have two range damage skills in farming, otherwise you're always waiting on this one skill, and if there's like 3 different things you want to attack, then you can end up sitting still attacking. So you want to use like this one on the first one, Drake on the second, and then Arcane Ball again on the third one, and that gets you doing it much faster. You also then got Polymorph. This is basically doing the same thing as Torrent here, hitting a large area, killing all those enemies. It's slightly longer cooldown than Torrent, which is why I put it on the other bar. So this is what I do for like my optimum farming setup. And then up here, this is what I use for auto farming. So Teleport doesn't actually get used, but if I ever want to switch from auto farming, if I want to just turn it off and quickly take over, then I have Teleport there ready to use. And here again, you've got to use a rune for Drake, damaging where it lands. It just helps out a little bit, but mainly it's going to be using these 2 skills. So just spamming Arcane Ball, and then it has Flame Armor or Crystal Armor, you know, anything which does damage around you to kill the enemies off there. So it's mainly these 2 skills which auto farming just does well with, and then having Drake with a rune that deals damage where it lands, it will just improve it very slightly. But yeah, so that's what I found is the best auto farming setup. So now moving back to the presentation here, we're going to go through. We're going into part 2 here, detailing what kind of stuff you want on your character, which skills you want to put points into. So we want to cover the passive skills first. Now this is an extract of my guide, my active and advanced skills guide on the forum. I'm not going to go through it in total. I just thought I may as well copy it in here so you could read it through if you want. But basically, over time, a lot of the passive skills have become pointless, which means they just don't really do that much for your character because the stats have changed over time. So there are ones which you don't need to put any points in at all. There are then these useful ones which give you some benefit to your character, but it's kind of either situational, just not that much. And then you've got the ones at the bottom which are actually still really, really good. So the couple of ones which I want to highlight are Intelligence here. So Intelligence, this adds 100 to 400 mana to your character. That's it at like 10 out of 99, and then maxed. This is one of the few passive skills that goes up to 99. Now 100 mana for 10 skill points is very good. I'd recommend doing that once you've got lots of skill points, but the 400 mana is a lot of skill points to put in. 99 skill points is a lot, so you only really want to do this like later on. It's basically an extra bonus to your character when you've got loads of skill points to use, but otherwise nothing that major. And then also PV health I wanted to point out. So this gives a fairly decent boost to health for Wizard, but again it's a lot lower benefit than putting 99 points in other things. so it's something you want to just look at later on when you've got loads of skill points. And then these essential ones here, basically you want them all at 10. The mana ones might surprise you, Spirit and Mana Drain here. These are basically because when you use a mana potion, it only increases the amount of mana you naturally gain. So you need to have these kind of naturally gaining mana from basic attacks, naturally gaining mana over time for mana potions to actually really work. So you don't have to have these at 10 per se. It's actually alright to have both of these at 5 when you have a low number of skill points, but later on you want to make these 10 just because they're a lot more useful that way. So that's passive skills for you, and we'll be going over it later, so don't worry if you don't follow completely. You don't need to take in everything. So now for the next bit, we need to, for looking at active skills, we need to be looking at the different types of content, how we want our character to be set up for these different types of content, and what how many points we want to have in the different things, what's actually required in each of these bits of content. So the 5 types of content in the game are farming, PvP, general PvE. General PvE is your kind of events and tournaments, the kind of general content in the game. How you want to be dealing with AI-controlled enemies, basically. Tough PvE, this is talking about the really tricky maps, like master maps and stuff, where there's the enemies themselves are like super tough, they'll kill you really quickly, and you maybe want to play with like slightly different strategies. The only difference here between tough PvE and general PvE is you might want to include things like Mimic, or just like a little bit more control stuff. Typically, this content isn't out that much, and actually if you're looking at doing this, you probably just want to use your general PvE setup, or just like very slight changes. So actually I'm going to exclude this just for simplicity. We're not going to go through tough PvE, but it's just something which you might use a slightly different setup for. Then we've got guild raids. Now guild raids, they're all about just high damage output. You don't need any defense skills and stuff. So it's a very different setup to other cases. However, you might want different number of points in the skills to get kind of more damage output, more damage per second. But ultimately, you wouldn't really want to create a guild raid build because it's going to suck at everything else. So the only times when you'd want to create a guild raid build is if you're like really pushing and you're going to do loads of extra runs and stuff. So you'd switch to a guild raid build, you'd do your runs, and then you'd switch back. So actually, for creating your kind of ultimate build, or what you need overall on a build, it's not important. It's not necessary to go through guild raids because they're just not. It's not going to apply to everything else. So what we end up with is just 3 types of content that you'd want maybe a different setup for. And I'm now going to go through this, each of these in turn and talk about what you actually need for each of them, what's important, and so we can work out if there's anything contradicting. And how to optimize your build for all 3 types. First type is farming. So the essential things you need for this are a low cooldown teleport, low cooldown arcane ball, and a long duration frost armor. This means these skills have to be at 10 out of 99. If they get pushed beyond, they're going to be less efficient. Your farming is going to be worse. Arcane Ball, you can increase it to up to 40, and it doesn't increase the cooldown by too much. It's not going to really detriment your farming. But yeah, so you can't really push it too high, otherwise your farming is going to be slowed down. The useful things for this is having a polymorph. Now this includes the Skurun. You need a Skurun for this, but basically having some points in polymorph, that will be useful. And then a large rain torrent, which means you have to get it all the way to 99. Requires a lot of extra points. It's only like a useful extra thing in farming, but it's worth noting. You might want to do this at a later date. Then we've got PvP. So the essential things for this, we need polymorph at 99. If you want to compete at high level PvP or just do really well against opponents that are at your stage, polymorph is an excellent addition to your PvP build because it will disable the opponent for 4 seconds, as well as doing good damage. You can catch that they can't get immunity to polymorph, even if they get stun immunity and stuff. It is a brilliant PvP skill, probably the best skill in the game, and so having this is essential for PvP if you want to do well. So that requires 99 points, but yeah, as you can see, it's the first one so far that's been required to have 99. Then as for the skills that you want for PvP, there are a lot, so it's better to actually say which skills are not needed. The skills that are not needed are these 5 skills. Basically all the others you want to have at 10 points in them, just because they come into play in some way or another. It's brilliant to have the full utility of all the different skills in PvP. It's really hard to argue against that in any case. So yeah, basically there are going to be a lot of skills you need for PvP that are kind of essential in order to do it well. Then the useful additions for PvP, you've got high damage and mana bolts, so basically putting a lot of points into mana bolts. You want a low cooldown protection bubble. If you increase this further, it's gonna get worse for PvP. The best healing for Healing Fountain. So with a skill rune, this goes up. It's a 20% heal per second. If you get it to 99, it becomes a 30% heal per second. It's kind of unnecessary in some cases, but it's a benefit. You know, putting extra points into this. Getting the health regen from increasing Archmage up to 99. That's a very useful boost for PvP. Again, a lot of points, and it's going to increase the mana cost a lot, but that's an extra benefit. And then including Refract in your build. So Refract is a great PvP skill. It's not really used anywhere else, but it's going to really benefit your character if you can include this. It's again 99 points. So as you can see here, there are a lot of extra points which you can put into skills to improve your play in PvP. And it's really kind of like what you may look at later on once you've created your build, is kind of adding these things in to make your build better. There's also the complication of increasing damage from certain skills. So it can be argued that it's a lot better to have higher damage from each skill use you do in PvP. People are going to be disabling you, you know, with stun, polymorph, that kind of stuff. So when you do get skills off, you want them to be doing higher damage, as well as like being able to do more damage in a short period of time by using all your skills in turn. So I would argue that this is not worth it once you get elemental stats high, because so much of the damage is coming from the skill rune, which doesn't increase by getting the skill higher. However, if you're below like 200% in the element you're using, then you can get a benefit from increasing Arcane Ball and Arcane Beam up to 40. Going beyond 40, you get the cooldown kind of a bit too high. But yeah, so that's kind of something which you may consider as well. The next one is PvE. So for PvE, we've got the essential things is having a low cooldown Drake. Drake is going to be great for PvE, and you don't want to push that beyond 10. That's very important. Again, like PvP, a lot of skills can come into play here, so it's actually better to look at which skills are not useful, and those are these 4 skills. Now, I just want to say, if you're not following all this stuff, like it's you know, I can imagine it's way too much to take in. I'm going to collect all that all together just in a second, so bear with me. So those other skills which don't need to be used in PvE at all. All the others you want to have at like 10 out of 99 really. So yeah, there's a lot of skills, to be honest, overall, which you need at 10, just to have all that you can put into these different parts of the content. So the useful things here is having a long duration polymorph. Now this is a full house, because I've said here it's useful to have polymorph in farming, it's essential in PvP, and it's useful to have at 99 for PvE. You can probably tell already, polymorph is amazing, and you want to have it in every build. So yeah, long duration mimic as well. This is more for if you want to create a full damage build, then it's very useful there. It's also for like the really tough PvE content. It's kind of where that's coming into play here, even though I excluded it earlier. You know, it's here. It's that's what you want to do. And then also a large rain torrent that can be handy with certain builds. It's another useful thing. And then there's again the same thing, having more damage on certain skills. You can do this on Arcane Ball and Arcane Beam. It's gonna help you out a bit if you have low elemental stats. There's also the addition of Mana Storm here, which is more of a PvE skill, and again, you can actually get this to 99 because the cooldown doesn't increase very much, so that can be quite useful. However, I kind of think it's a bit weird to say, because by the time you have enough points to put 99 into Mana Storm, you've probably got good elemental stats. So it's a very kind of niche case. But anyway, that's it on each of the 3 bits of content. So let's collect all that information together to actually work out what we're going to be doing. So collecting that together, for the passive skills, we want to have 60 points in there. There's an extra kind of 169 there, just because, sorry, not 169, 109. There's an extra points there, which is the kind of what you want to add in later on. However, it's basically the 60 points that you want to add into those passives. So just showing that in an image, if you don't, because that is harder to look at. This is it in an image here, and like I was saying earlier, only putting 5 points into these, so it's actually 50 points here. If you've got a few number of skill points, then you only put 50 in. However, if you what you'd like to do is put 60 in, put these both to 10. So anyway, this is just an illustration of this is what you want to do with your passive skills to begin with. Then we've got the essential active skills. So there's actually 209 points here that you want to put in. Looking at this, it might be hard to read, but basically we're excluding the 4 advanced skills. These they cost too many points. You don't actually really need them, so they're all excluded. Also, not including Mimic and Burst. Basically all the others at 10, and then Polymorph to 99. So that in total is 269 points, which sounds like a lot for essential stuff. However, I would say that this is basically what you want to achieve before you do anything else. You want to create this build with 269 points before you put any bonus onto any other skill, because you won't get as much benefit from putting bonus, say, mana bolts up to like 40 or something. You won't get as much bonus as you will from that compared to adding these other skills onto your class. And Polymorph to 99 gives you more benefit than any other skill going beyond 10, so that's just important to get up to 99 first. It's like on the Knight class where Spikes just gives such a huge buff to the character that like basically you want to get it to 99 before you boost anything else beyond 10. So looking at this here, you can see missing Mimic and Burst, those 4 skills. You've got Polymorph to 99, as I showed earlier. The other things to point out, if I just remember, are that, oh yes, I wanted to mention how a lot of people they struggle to stop at 10 out of 99 because they feel like it's unfinished. Now, if you were in the game originally, you'd know that 10 was actually the final level, so you could feel like, okay, the skill's completed. And a lot of people find it weird to like push Polymorph up to 99 while they still have all the other skills at 10. It just doesn't feel right to them. If you can get in the mindset that at 10 out of 99 is when a skill is completed, and it's just actually between 10 and 99, all you're doing is adding some extra benefit, and in some cases it's negative. It's just basically changing the skill a bit between 10 and 99. Then you can probably rest easy a little bit more. When they're at 10, they are finished. It's just beyond that you may do it because there's some kind of extra benefit. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit with sticking with this. But anyway, so this is the build I would recommend that everyone works towards before you're at 269 skill points. This is what you should be working towards. And in terms of the order of doing that, we'll get into that later on at the end of this video when we're talking about builds. Where to go beyond that is where it gets interesting. So the things which are now we're using the from above, I mentioned the useful things in each of these sections. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll to the right point there. So the useful things, there are 574 extra skill points which you may want to put into things. So I'm not going to talk through each one of these in turn because I'm about to talk through them in a different way. But you can see here, this is like listing them where they're good in PvE. This is where it's going to help in both PvE and PvP. Listing where it will help. This is the skill point change, where you take mana bolts from 10 to 99. And these 3 at the bottom here, I've highlighted with stars. This is because you'll only do this if your elemental stats are below 200%. If they're above 200%, you won't do these last 3 because they're not actually going to benefit you. So putting all that into your character, this in total is 952 skill points. That's including everything. However, it doesn't include these last 3, and it doesn't include intelligence 99. So that is a lot of skill points, but that would be your kind of ultimate setup of your character. So this is the passive skills, the ultimate setup of the passive skills. Like I said, not including intelligence 99. You would kind of do that too, but I didn't bother including that. But anyway, so that was the ultimate setup of passives. You just don't really need these other ones. They're not going to give you any benefit. And then here is the ultimate setup of the active skills. So as you can see, it's not missing any of the main skills at all. It's just missing out Arcane Blast and Leech. And then you've got 99 skill points on certain skills. The skills which are not at 99 here, I would say, are just not worth putting to 99 at all. That said, Arcane Breath here, if they have a skill rune for it after I make this video, which uses the base damage, then sure, you might want to put this to 99. Well, actually, it would be one of the cases where, like Mana Storm, you only do it if you're below 200% elemental stats, I think. But anyway, so these skills, they're the ones which benefit from going to 99, and where you don't really get any problems in any of the other kind of types of content. So that's the ultimate build. And now going back to this, the order which you want to do these in, because that's, I think, the important bit. I would recommend to any wizard that they work towards this setup, this 269 points, and then from there, there's actually a very strict order that I would do add in points to extra things. I say this because, with reason, which I will go through as I'm going through it, I will kind of justify why I'm saying this particular order. Because I don't think there's, I was surprised. I thought there may be some bits where it's like, oh yeah, you could do this first or this first, but actually it's pretty much a strict order that I would do things in. So the first thing is burst. Putting this up to 10 points, it's just so cheap, and it's going to give you a benefit in PvP if you want to be using this burst skill, that with all the other ones, they're like getting to 99 and stuff, and so 10 points, you can kind of put that aside first before doing anything else. No, actually, this is probably one of the cases you could skip this and do something, do mana bolts first, but like, I would do burst first. The next thing is to get mana bolts to 99. Mana bolts to 99 will really help you out in PvP. It's going to be doing a lot of damage in one hit, and that's just it's gonna help you out so much, way more than other things, and way more than doing these last three skills, which I'll go through in a second. So yeah, Mimic to 10 is the next thing. Mimic is just a useful skill for getting like huge damage if you want to create a build to do massive damage output in a short period of time in PvE. It's going to be really good there. It can be helpful in guild raids too. So getting this to 10, again, it's a very cheap thing to do. There's no point really skipping this. Getting it to 99 is kind of the last thing you want to do, but getting it to 10 is, you may as well do it at this point. The star skills, so these are, they add an extra benefit to your character if your elemental stats are below 200%. However, the benefit they give is less than mana bolts. I said I was going to explain, and now it's like slipped my mind completely. But basically, per point in it and stuff, like you're going to be here. You're getting a flat-out benefit on mana bolts. It's just going to really improve the part of where you want the damage dealing, which is like in an instant damage dealer. That's going to be improving it a lot more than if you improve these skills so they deal more damage but have a lower cooldown and stuff. Can't remember the exact justification right now actually, but anyway, just trust me on this. It's much better to get this to 99 before you put any points in these other skills. I worked through the numbers and worked it out and came up with some justification before, which I didn't write down. The next thing to do is add refract. So if you have more than 200% elements, you just skip this step. You go straight to refract. Refract is going to help you out a lot in PvP. It's going to do a serious amount of damage, defense, and stuff. And if you can get used to using it, it's excellent to use. So this is just a great addition to the class, but it takes 99 points, which is why you probably don't want to do it earlier on. Archmage it to 99 is the next thing. This is just going to help you out everywhere. I list here PvE and PvP, because the healing is brilliant. If you're not so bothered about PvP, then I would say do these the other way around, or maybe even put refract even further, just because refract is only for PvP. So Archmage, this is going to just help you out everywhere. It's a great addition to the class, but you need to kind of do it later on when you've got enough mana. You need about 1,500 mana before you can consider getting this to 99. Otherwise, you're going to be struggling to really control how much mana you have. The next thing is Healing Fountain, getting this from 10 to 99. It boosts the healing. In PvP, Healing Fountain is a brilliant defense skill, so it's going to help you out there a lot. In PvE, it's not going to help you out that much because it's already healing 30% a second, and 30% to 40% is nice, but not that required. But yes, it doesn't increase the cooldown much at all, so it's just basically a buff. As you can see, it's less important than these other ones, but it's just a useful boost to your character. The next one to get up is Torrent. This is not used in PvP at all. It's just basically for farming and in certain PvE builds. So again, a little bit more situational, not really required earlier on, but it's a nice benefit to your character. You're going to be farming a bit faster and more fluidly, so it's good to have there. And then the last thing to do is to push Mimic up from 10 to 99. This is just going to be useful in certain bits of content, certain builds, kind of handy. And then, if you get through all of that, you've completed the build. And, well, you've completed the wizard class. There's basically no point having any more skill points. But anyway, so that's it there. I hope that's all clear enough, and you know what you're doing there with building your build, working the skill points in, and yeah, we're going to go through builds later on in the video in actual setups and stuff. So stick around for that. So the third section of this video we're going to go through now is the damage output and defense on the wizard. So how you're going to use the skills and how they actually play into damage and defense on the class. So when it comes to damage, I did a breakdown quite a while ago. I can't remember if I shared it or not. But basically, I've done various analysis on the damage output of a wizard, and all the classes, in fact. And wizard is actually kind of the most interesting in this case, because things are so formulaic. So if you look at the numbers on particular things, for example, Mana Bolts and Mana Storm, these each deal 58% per hit of damage, and they do 6 hits. They both do exactly the same. One is just like on a single target, and one's on an area. That's the way they work. Then you look at ones like Arcane Ball, who do 116%, which is exactly double the 58%. So that is, clearly on purpose. They've done exactly double. And if you look at something like, so if you compare Mana Bolts and Mana Storm to Arcane Beam, this does 105%, which is a little bit less than double, but basically double, and it does 6 hits. So in fact, if you compare like Mana Bolts to Arcane Beam, hitting a single target in both cases, Arcane Beam does almost exactly double the damage. And you see this all across the wizard class, that these ones kind of deal basically double the damage of these ones, and then these ones deal less. So there are kind of identified primary damage skills and secondary damage skills, with the secondary ones doing kind of half what you get from the primary damage skills. That's also considering the cooldown. That's what I've done here, kind of consider the cooldown, how often you actually use them and stuff. And you basically get these 4 skills as the main damage dealers on the class, and then these ones as the kind of top-up damage dealers that will really help out and stuff. And then these ones which basically they don't really play into your damage output. They just give a slight benefit. If you happen to be using them for another reason, then they'll be adding a little bit of damage on as well. So putting that together, and how you actually want to use them, how you want to use them in build creating, it's very important to focus on these primary damage skills. So you can see here, these are some note stuff. So I would recommend using all the primary damage skills in your build that you can do. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, where I've listed in runes, it's only if you're using a particular rune or whatever, that's when they become that good. And Protection Bubble here, it's only in PvP. In PvE, this is more like a minor damage skill. And Drake is useless in PvP for damage. So anyway, that's just explaining those notes there if you didn't get them. So the primary damage skills, you want to have basically all of them, and then also be using them when you're actually playing and in the combat. You want to be using them as soon as they come off cooldown, because that is how you're going to get good damage output from Wizard. Wizards typically struggle with damage output, and you can see here these ones are all added in skill runes. Before we had skill runes, before we had these damage skill runes, Wizards had just terrible damage output compared to the other two classes. They always struggled with it. Now that we have these 3 skill runes, they have good damage output and they can do very well. So anyway, you want to include as many of these as possible, and then some secondary damage skills as well. So I do a kind of this is a very I'm hesitant to say, because basically this scaling is a kind of just very rough guide. I just kind of put some points to it, so then I can grade things on how much damage output they have. So you can see here I give 2 points for a primary skill, 1 point for a secondary skill, and 0.5 for a minor. So when you're kind of creating a build, you want to have more than 8 points really to have the build as a good damage dealer. When I say build, I mean the 10 hotkeys you have set up on your class. So for that reason, if you're using only 2 of these 2 primary skills, then you want to be having quite a few of the secondary skills. Otherwise, your damage output isn't going to be no good at all. However, if you're using, say for example, if you in your PvP build you have all 4 of these, you're gonna be solid with damage dealing. And then maybe the other skills you could use like just defense skills or that kind of stuff, and you wouldn't actually struggle with your damage output. That's just kind of like, you know, a rough measure to kind of understand how you can create your setup for those 10 skills and have good damage output, you know, kind of reliably. This is what you're going to be looking at with the grading. So anyway, that's kind of it here that I was going to go through. I just wanted to highlight the good damage skills, the ones that kind of add to it, and then the sort of not very useful ones. They're just really not going to be benefiting you, to make it clear, because I think it's very important to know this stuff, not just for build creating, setup creating, but like actually in the combat as well, to know that, okay, if I want damage, I've got to use these skills, and these ones are just kind of a lot more top-up ones and stuff. Anyway, so that's the damage on the wizard class. Now we're going to go to defense. So this is quite interesting, I think. There are a lot of skills on the wizard class which can work as defense skills. The first here, which are like literal buffs, you know, they reduce the damage you take, that kind of thing. And then we've got the control defense skills, which are a lot on the wizard class, and these will kind of keep you out of combat, control the enemies so they can't attack you, that kind of thing. Now, to kind of narrow this down a little bit more, there are certain ones which are a bit more outclassed in terms of defense. So burst here, this is pretty much outclassed by polymorph and maybe torrent as well. It's got a lower cooldown and stuff, but like it doesn't hit that big an area. The stun effect isn't that useful and stuff. It basically gets outclassed in terms of controlling the enemies, as well as you need to be like next to the enemies to use it. So Mana Storm, similarly, this is pretty much outclassed by Arcane Ball, because Arcane Ball can slow down enemies from range. Mana Storm, you have to be, it creates it around you, and because of the animation, and then you kind of need to run out of the area in order to actually benefit from the enemies being slowed and kept away from you. It doesn't really work so well as a control skill. You have to be teleporting to be honest, in order to benefit from it and stuff, and it's just kind of outclassed by Arcane Ball, which can keep enemies away from range and far more reliably because you've got the low cooldown. So Mana Storm isn't so useful for that. So what we end up with is these different 10 skills, and you can see I've put a little star next to some of them, which I would say are the most important ones for having on any build in order to make the build good at defending itself and controlling the enemies and that kind of stuff. So if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm highlighting the certain skills you want on every class for damage, as well as, you know, you want a small selection of these. And then you want these skills on the class in order to have defense. So by putting these two things together, what you can do is you can kind of really focus on, okay, I need to have these skills in a build, and then I have a few slots which then I can play around with in order to change the setup and make it work in different ways. That's what I'm really getting at, and I hope you can follow that, because that's the important theory in order to create, you know, effective builds. So these are the 5 skills which you want, and I'm just going to go through them. I'm not going to bother going through these and how they play into things because it's too much. So the Frost Armor, this is just going to give you a constant defense buff. It's perfect everywhere. You just want it. You want it all the time. Protection Bubble. This in PvP, it's like a huge damage skill, so you want it for that definitely, as well as giving you the protection. And then PvE, it's brilliant to have if you ever get put in a tight spot where you're either going to be attacked a lot, or you're on low health and you need to quickly survive and get out of there and heal or whatever. It's just a great skill to have. Archmage, this is only actually technically a defense buff when it's got to 99, but the healing from that is very useful. And you'd have it on every build for like just a number of reasons, but also that defense is actually surprisingly effective at keeping you alive. Polymorph, I've gone through this a couple of points in this video. It's just incredible for controlling enemies. 12 seconds of polymorph in PvE is just ridiculous, and then in PvP it's even just 4 seconds is good there. So yeah, this is just great for controlling the enemies, keeping them away from you, stopping them from attacking you, all that stuff. Drake, now this is for PvE. It just distracts enemies and can keep them off you. In combination with other stuff, it's great for just reducing the kind of damage you take, because fewer of the enemies are going to be attacking you. So this is just great to have in every PvE setup. And then teleport in PvP, increasing your mobility, is one of the best things you can do in the game. Being able to, with teleport in PvP, you can choose when you enter the combat, when you exit the combat, you can chase down people. all that kind of great stuff. It's just perfect for every single PvP build. If you're not using it, you're just not gonna do well in PvP. As much as you try to get great damage output from stuff, not having that extra mobility means the wizard class just doesn't perform as well as the other classes. So what this here is, if you have been looking at it already, this is an illustration of how you can use defense buffs in order to kind of cover any gaps and basically survive for a longer period of time. So this may come as like second nature to you if you play the class a long time and you just use the skills and you know how to kind of stagger them and like play it. But if I wanted to go through this anyway because I want to go through on each class to kind of show how you can defend yourselves over longer periods of time using the skills together, because skills are often looked at individually, whereas actually if you look at the class and how all the defense skills can come together, that's how it all comes into play. This only includes the buffs. It doesn't include things like Drake and Polymorph and all that kind of stuff. So like if any gap does appear, you can just teleport away and put down Drakes and stuff. So this is only a certain, a small portion of what wizards can do, to be honest, especially in PvE. But anyway, going through this, you can see the seconds across the top. I'm going to do 30 seconds of period, and you can see the frost armor here. You put this on immediately, and then as soon as you can again. So basically there's this one gap here especially which you need to worry about, where you can take very heavy damage. You need to kind of be anticipating this well in advance, and that's why you need to kind of use your other skills around it a little bit more. So anyway, Archmage, when you've got this to level 99 and it gives you this healing buff, this in combination with frost armor actually works really quite effectively at keeping you alive, and you can probably survive a few seconds before you need anything else. So then you'd use protection bubble, which goes over that period of time, and it should keep you alive. You heal back up to full health with Archmage and frost armor over this time probably, and then you can survive a few more seconds. When Archmage ends, this is when you can put Fountain on, and as you can see, like there's almost always two things going on at any one time, which will keep you defended, keep you surviving. Sorry, is what I mean. So anyway, as the Archmage ends, you can put Fountain on, and then you continue the healing with the defense buff going on. If you get hit really heavily in this period of time, you can start Fountain a bit earlier, because actually there's a bit of time overlap here with the ending of this, so that's fine to do. When the defense buff ends, you're going to start seeing your health drop. Even though you've got the fountain going on, you're going to be taking heavy damage. So protection bubble can be used here if you need it in order to cover this gap, which in combination with the fountain, you should be able to survive well to then when you put the armor buff on again. And basically you can alternate between protection bubble and fountain a bit in order to survive for a very long period of time. Refract, you can see here, is not even included. You don't really need it in a lot of cases, which is why I say you don't need it in PvE, because this is generally how you do it in PvE, and most bits of content you can complete in like 30 seconds or so once you get fairly strong. So you doing this with your defense buffs is going to keep you alive over that period of time, and you don't need to worry about anything. You can just be attacking or whatever. Refract comes into play in PvP, and generally you take more heavy damage in PvP, so you need to use things a bit sooner. So you need to use protection bubble kind of about here, and then maybe fountain about here or so. So refract can come into play there to push healing fountain further back, because you can use protection bubble at this period of time, and then use refract kind of around here, and then then the fountain here, and you haven't used it that much sooner, or that kind of thing. It can come into play to help push back other things, so you have more defense buffs going on at any one time. Additionally, it can be used at the same time as protection bubble in order to get that huge reflect damage going on. So that's where it can come in as an extra addition to what's going on and actually help in damage. But anyway, I didn't want to go too much into this and pull it apart. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to say about it, because a lot of people this will be kind of second nature to, or they just won't really get what I'm getting at here. But anyway, as you can see, hopefully that's the kind of analogy of how you can use these defense buffs in order to survive over periods of time quite well, and how they can kind of cover gaps and that kind of thing. Typically what I do is I actually teleport away at this point here. So when I see frost armor is going to, the buff's going to be ending, I then teleport away, and then I still have protection bubble ready for a later time when I'm going to be taking lots of heavy damage. That's typically what you want to do. If you can get away in this period of time, then teleport away. Otherwise, you can cover it, as illustrated here. So that's defense on a wizard, and now we've gone through damage and defense. I've given you an idea of the skills that you want to use, how you want to use them, and that kind of stuff. So now we're going to go into part 4 of this video, which is where we talk through builds. Now for this, I'm going to be going back to showing pictures, and I've got to scroll to the right bit first. So we're going to go through various builds, which I've kind of put together as examples, and I picked particular points in skill points. So the reason why I picked 120 skill points here is that 120 skill points was typically what people would reach when they got to platinum difficulty in events. That was in the past. So at that point, that's when they're facing the content, the sort of tough content, which their stats actually balanced for, and they need to have a build that really works in order to be able to complete that content. So that's when you need the build, as well as before 120 skill points, you can't really create a complete build, like one that's actually effective. There are always gaps, and so before that point, you pretty much just want to try out different things and put only a few points in different skills, because you don't have the skill points to go with that. You might also want to just focus on 5 skills or something, rather than trying to push it up to 10 skills. The only advice I will give is Drake. I'd really highly recommend putting 10 points in Drake when you're fairly new to the game, because Drake is going to do quite a lot of damage when your stats aren't really fully there together. You haven't got good damage from skill runes and stuff. Drake is going to be really helping you out. So let's get into this first build. If I can full screen it, if it's going to let me. I don't know if it's going to let me. There we go. It's going to let me now. It's not going to do it. Sorry, okay. Messing about here. So this first build is a range build, and I tried to make these builds kind of highly focused in a particular way of doing content, and so then you can kind of draw from them. Maybe you want to draw from 2 different builds and kind of make a hybrid that does both of these things. So this particular one, this first one, is the ranged damage dealer. You can see here in the background, this is bar 1, bar 2, and then the skill points there. I didn't bother showing passives because whatever. So this particular build, it's only got 50 points in passives. That is only 5 in mana drain and spirit. You'll see this in all my 120 skill point builds, just because you can then get an extra 10 points by reducing those to 5. So this one is basically lower damage than the other builds that I'm going to show. However, that damage is coming from range, and it means that it's good for party play, or if you're a bit weaker, so you can stay away from the enemies, you can get hit less, it's a lot more reliable, and this is probably the build which I would go with if I was a new player and I was up to this point, just because it's going to be probably a lot easier to do the content. It's also great for party play, because in party play you can put down lots of Drake's decoys, that kind of stuff, to control the enemies, and then just attack them all from range very safely. It's also great for party play, because if you're playing with an archer and they use Mark of Death on the boss, then all your range attacks get increased as well as the archers, which is great for boss kills, and that's really good. And the other builds are more melee focused, which means they're not going to be benefiting from that archer range buff in Mark of Death. So here we have the points for PvE and PvP. This is when I was using the point system earlier on. For damage output, this is kind of your damage output in these 2 things, which you can compare to the other 2 builds I'm going to be showing. But basically, it's a bit lower, a bit less good in your damage output. However, you've got great evasion with teleport and arcane ball. If you've got a slow skill rune in that, and then putting down the drakes and stuff, you can just stay away from the enemies brilliantly. Another thing to note is that most of it is single target damage. So other skills and stuff, they may have, other builds will have a bit more damage at dealing basically to a lot of enemies nearby, which you just don't really get from the range skills. There's arcane ball, but it's just, there's not going to be that much area damage going on. So what you do when you're using this build is basically you have your defense buff of frost armor on, you save protection bubble for when enemies actually get close and they're attacking you, and you basically put down drakes from afar and attack enemies from afar. And then if they start coming nearby, you teleport away, you put drakes to kind of distract them, keep them away, and that's the idea. So you teleport around the enemies and keep attacking them from distance. If they come near, you've also got protection bubble. That's the idea. You can keep enemies away and survive very well. Pretty much what it does. So it's a very, very good, useful build, I would say, but maybe not your style if you want to get a bit more aggressive or something. So the next one I'm going to talk about is a melee damage dealer. So this one, the points here is quite a lot more damage than the previous build. However, you've really got to be able to survive. And that's the issue here, is that when you have a low number of skill points, I would assume that you're not that strong. So being able to survive in the content can be quite tricky. That's where the previous build could work out really well, and where this one may suffer. However, that said, there are some skills here which can help you survive very well. So again, we got the 50 points in passives, just absolute minimal there possible. And then what we've got is got to actually look at it. Sorry, I was I was talking and not reading. What we've got is a sort of damage dealers like Arcane Breath and Mana Storm. If I put it down here at the bottom, actually, we've got Arcane Breath and Mana Storm for damaging those enemies that are coming nearby, as well as the addition of Healing Fountain to help survive. This is really, really good for surviving, along with Frost Armor and Protection Bubble. You can probably tank a lot of those enemies that come nearby while you're damaging them all very effectively. You can use Arcane Beam to do extra damage, because this is just brilliant damage skill, and also to do boss kills and stuff. Polymorph is there as a great way to either get rid of the enemies when they sorry, how to explain. Get rid of the enemies when you're near death and you need to polymorph them all so they're not attacking you, or you can otherwise use it for damage healing. It's really good for that. So what I'd often do in content is I would run into where the boss is. What did I do there? Run right next to the boss, start attacking with these area damage skills and also Arcane Beam, and then as the enemies come in, I then use Polymorph, so all those enemies just run the other direction. I'm still just facing the boss, and then these kind of tanking skills can survive the boss attacks really quite nicely, so you can stick there and do a lot of damage. So there are a few things which this build is missing. It's kind of optimizing for melee damage. However, like I said, it hasn't really got any evasion. It hasn't got any drakes, which might be helping out a lot. It hasn't got any archmage, which if you're not critting enough is a big problem. Your damage output will not be there. And also it requires runes on certain skills. So Arcane Breath, you need a rune there that means that it doesn't get into the animation lock. If there's animation lock, it's just pointless. You also need a rune for Polymorph in order to be doing have the good area and to have any damage at all on that. So it's a bit, it might not, it might be your style, but at this point in the game it may not work that well. I tried to make it work here with the build, but I don't know exactly how well this would actually work in practice. The next build we're going to be looking at is more of a PvP build. So if you love PvP and you want to make it work at this point of the game, where am I? Okay. If you want to make it work at this point in the game, then this is, I thought a lot about this and tried to optimize as best I could for a PvP build. So if you compare the damage output on this to the previous one, 7.5, 8.5, you can see here it's improved quite a lot. It's actually improved in PvE too, because it's basically because it's including more skills, and that because my point system kind of pushes it up. But what it's doing is it's using fewer points in some of the skills in order to get more skills onto the class. It's also got the addition of Archmage, which I said may be a big problem, not having Archmage on at this stage in your build creation. So I made sure that Archmage was on there for this one here. So it's got a lot of the great PvP skills in here, and as you can see, it's got 9 skills on the class, which is higher than the other ones. It's got Polymorph with 10 points, which is important to get the duration there. That's only going to polymorph people in PvP for 2 seconds, but it is very useful in addition to having stun in there too. So you can stun them when the stun ends, you polymorph them, and that will give you enough time to kind of kill someone off. So you also got reduced points in teleport. So teleport is here, however it's not 10 points, because technically you don't need 10 points a lot of the time. Gives you a little bit more range, a little bit faster cooldown, but in PvP you don't really need that. One of the big things about this is you have no arcane ball, which means for farming you're not going to be that good at farming, to be honest. Also, arcane ball is just generally a very good skill for PvE and stuff, but yeah, you don't have it at all here because you're maximising damage, and arcane ball doesn't actually add that much damage. I also looked at the skill runes which add slowing, and they only add really good slowing if you max out the skill rune. So at this point you probably want to focus on other skill runes, and so you won't have that that great slowing bonus. So it's just not a lot of point in arcane ball for PvP at this point of the game. So yeah, you got the defense buffs, as you can see. It's including all the good sort of standard defense buffs here, putting off for the disabling, and then high damage skills. That's the main idea here. You've got teleport in there as well because that's just essential in PvP, and yeah, it includes all that good stuff. Some points, you know, below 10, and oh yeah, I forgot to mention, yes, 40 in essential passives. So I managed to grab an extra 10 points by basically removing spirit and mana drain, because when you're in PvP you don't really need the mana stuff so much, because when you die your mana gets reset, and you don't have mana potions on, obviously, because potions are disabled. So actually, you know, if you really want to optimize, you can remove those completely. So yeah, as you can see, great damage, tanking and mobility, but no Drake, Arcane Ball and mana problems. Plus it requires runes like the previous build. You've got to have runes on some of these skills for them to actually work effectively. The runes which you'd really want to focus on, I said I wasn't going to talk about runes, but basically Arcane Breath in order to get great damage from this, and then also Protection Bubble, skill rune on that. Those the ones for PvP for that, they do incredibly high damage as kind of reflecting, so you need to level that up as well. So that's it for level 120. Oh, I've done the stupid zoom in thing again. So that's it for the level 120. Moving on from level 120, it gets a bit funny, and this is where I was going to really kind of change maybe what you thought I was going to do. So from 120, really what you want to do is add in more skills rather than like going with some weird setup of like certain number of points and stuff. If you're watching earlier on in this video, you'll know. Actually, no, I'll talk about this in a second. Next, we're going to talk about 160 skill points. So the reason why I picked 160 is because it's past that point of 120 where you can't necessarily have a complete build, and you're actually hitting that point where you can have a complete build. Now, if you watched earlier on in my video, you'll know that I said 269 points and stuff and all that kind of thing as like the build that you want to work towards and stuff, and that included polymorph at 99. Basically, once you hit 160, you can have that almost complete build, and that's why I'm only suggesting one build for 160 skill points. I'd say this is just the best one. It's going to work for you in all cases. It's missing, you know, a lot of those extra elements which you can have from having more skill points. However, this basically does everything that you want it to do, and you know, if you take any skill out of this, you're going to be doing worse. So I'll just lower, make this smaller again, so I can show the build. All right. So where was the build? Don't know if I got to it. No. Okay. Is this the build? Was I on the wrong build before? No. Okay, we're here. Sorry about that. Bit of confusion. Okay, so this is the build, and basically, as you can see, it's now got 10 skills here. It's got it's only missing Mana Storm, Burst, and Mimic. So you can see here, when I was talking about the essential stuff earlier on, and I included Mana Storm. Mana Storm is one of those ones you can cut out when you're lower skill points. And really why I picked 160 is I wanted to show what you do first before then going to that kind of optimum first, you know, what you're aiming for before then adding the extra stuff at the, you know, beyond 269 skill points. So this includes most of the skills, and they're all at 10. Because that's just really what's effective. Only 50 points in passives again, because I'd say that's one of the last things you want to do is increase those from 5 to 10. You want to get all the different skills first, and then you can see here this is a PvE setup, which is Yeah, pretty much my PvE setup that I use a lot of the time. The only thing I change is mana bolts for mana storm, but you know, that's not a huge benefit anyway. So yeah, this is what I'd recommend as the best build if you've got 160 skill points. It's just going to do everything you want it to do. You can create all the different strong builds and stuff, and it's the skill runes which give you the huge benefit. So you don't need those extra points and skills yet at this point. So yeah, this is what I'd recommend for that. So now what we're going to do is actually revisit the earlier point in the video where I went through kind of what you want to do, because beyond 160 skill points, really it's following that path which I illustrated earlier on. So if we scroll back up and go to find the right bit, this is the build you want to aim for, which I showed earlier on in the video. It's where you have the 60 points of passives, and then you have each of the skills at 10 basically, other than the 4 advanced skills, Mimic, Burst, and then you have Polymorph at 99. This is what you want to aim for before you do anything else, and then you go and you add these extra additions in the order which I showed earlier on in this video. That is, I would not differ from that in any way. That's just literally the way to do it. So in fact, looking at builds at higher levels of skill points would just be boring, because as you can see, I'd say, you know, it's just in this order. So if I pick like a random point, it will just be like a random point in this order. So instead, what I want to do at this point in the video, and when talking about builds that you'd be doing at the end game, is actually look at the different setups you do. So here what we're going to do is literally look at different setups of skills, and then in terms of how many points you have in these different skills, it doesn't really, you know, matter so much. It's just wherever you are in the development of your character. So we're going to be looking at actually, you know, how you're going to use these skills in order to create good setups. Because I guess builds can be used in both ways, of like, it can be used to mean how many skill points you have in different things, and it can also be used to mean which 10 skills you have on your character. So this is the kind of really high level stuff. I'm going to assume you have all the skill points in the game, and you know, just how you're going to use these skills. So this stuff is what we talked about at the beginning of the video. We're actually going to be talking about the different builds. There are 3 builds shown in this image here. As you can see, these share bar 1. So bar 1 here, this is my preferred bar 1. It's just going to give you a lot of defense. Polymorph in there as well. It's just very solid for doing what you want, and giving you all the coverage you would like. These are PvE builds. Sorry if I didn't say already. Now bar 1 here, this is the sorry, bar 2. This is the general purpose PvE build. I would say it's what I use pretty much all the time, and I wouldn't differ from it too much. It's good, has good close range damage, and then you can switch Mana Storm out, because this is the kind of the weakest skill on the build. You can switch this out to do Mana Storm or Teleport, depending on what you kind of want. When things get really tough, I typically switch this out for Teleport, and it lowers your damage a bit, but you've still got, you know, some good damage options. You've got a bit of range damage, you've got some close range damage, you've got the control with other skills, and then obviously Teleport, you know, being there for control, and then you've got the defense. It gives you everything that you could want, and just little changes to it for the particular bits of content work quite well. So this gives you good damage, good defense, good close range damage. Mainly you want to be in close range. This is mainly, you know, to stand and tank next to enemies. Like I was saying earlier with the 120 builds, if you can't tank the enemies that well, you want to kind of go for a more range damage option, and this is where maybe you switch this for Teleport and switch this for Mana Bolts, and then you can just you can do it from range. This second one is a range damage build, but very much focused on range damage, and, you know, controlling the enemies, keeping away from them. This is the kind of, if you want to go fully extreme on surviving, maybe this is the kind of build which you would do for very tough content. I actually say this is the one which I'd switch for. Yeah, of course, because I was talking more melee here. This is the one where you'd switch this for Mana Bolts. I was talking about that just a second ago. It's also better in party play, because Torrent is a solo skill, because it's where enemies are coming at you and then you knock them away from you. You know, in party play that's just going to mess things up or just be irrelevant. You don't actually use it. So this is a range build where you do have to teleport, and as you can see, just a small change from the previous one, where you just switched to a bit more range damage, bit less damage output overall because you're removing Arcane Breath. But great control there. This last one is for maximum damage. Now this again, it's kind of similar to before. You can probably see, I'm including a lot of these skills like I showed earlier on in this video with the main damage skills, the main defense skills and stuff, the ones which you want to pretty much include all the time. It's just the other ones which are changing on these builds, and that can really show in this image. So as you can see on the bar 1, I've changed Healing Fountain for Mimic. This is assuming that you basically don't really need defense. You can just go in there and kill the boss as quickly as possible. So Healing Fountain is the one to drop there. So you change that to Mimic. That's going to increase your damage output a bit. And then in bar 2 here, you've removed Arcane Ball. So there's no more Arcane Ball. Instead, it's actually this lineup here, which I've removed Arcane Ball, changed it to Mana Bolts. And this is they're just high damage skills, longer cooldown, but you can, you spam them all off after you've used this, and then you can kill enemies, the bosses really quickly. So there's less defense, less utility. It's gonna struggle, really suffer if you can't tank the enemies, or that kind of thing. Then this build is bad. But for maximum damage output, this is the best maximum damage output build. Next up, we're going to talk through PvP builds. So this is PvP builds, and as you can see, if we start from the bottom again, bar 1 here, this is exactly the same hotbar as I used for PvE. It's just got the defense skills on, the solid ones, the ones which are going to be very useful, and they're going to help you survive. A key thing to point out here, Healing Fountain. It's got a very long cooldown, which I'm always a bit iffy about very long cooldown things, especially in something like PvP, because they're going to be sat there not doing much a lot of the time. So it's kind of wasting a slot on your hotbar. However, and that's why I've changed it out for Mimic. In the previous case, when you don't really need it, you can switch it to Mimic. In PvP, having it there is essential because it's going to be doing so much for you. It has the addition of the 25% damage reduction on top of the healing, which means that when you use it, you are going to be surviving incredibly well for those 10 seconds. So it is very important, and you can kind of manage the long cooldown because of that, especially if you have like teleport to get away when you have defense problems. So yeah, it's an essential thing to have, and you've got to really have it on there on the hotbar. The other skills, they're just all awesome. So first up here, this first build, this is the bar 2. This is my personal favourite. I think it just includes all the best skills. So you've got the excellent damage options here of Arcane Beam and Arcane Breath. No, Mana Breath. Yeah, Arcane Breath. Sorry. Arcane Beam is less damage in PvP, but it gives you range damage, which is always very useful, as well as a stun. So this is literally my only stun on the class, and that's going to be good. A range stun is excellent. It's 2 seconds. It's just very useful, as well as then the good damage. So brilliant PvP skill there. Teleport, absolute must. And then you've got Arcane Ball here for controlling enemies. So if you just quickly compare this to the next bar, you can see Arcane Ball's been removed. And the main reason why I have it here is because it's so useful for controlling knights. For if you're chasing anyone down, you can hit them with Arcane Ball. They get slowed. Sorry, I mean with a skill rune that uses slow, that deals slow. And so that's where this really plays into things, and it gets very useful. So a great addition to your setup, as well as it's a minor damage skill. It's not a primary one, but sorry, it's not a minor one, it's a secondary one. So yeah, it's going to be helping out with damage as well. And then Mana Bolts here, brilliant damage skill for PvP, just excellent stuff. So overall, the damage output that you get from this is very high. You could go for more damage output, but the amount of utility you have and the other things just makes this outclass any other build. That's what I've found, and this of course is slightly what to call it. It's to do with the current skill runes. So if better skill runes come for certain skills and stuff and make them more viable and everything, then this won't be my preferred setup. But right now, this has been standing for like a year. This is my favorite PvP setup, And I've had a lot of people say to me, you know, when they face me and stuff, they're like, you know what, actually, I think your build works better than any other wizard setup. So, you know, not bragging or anything, but I'm quite proud of the setup. The next one I'm going to go through, this is a Mana Storm variant. So I'm quite biased against Mana Storm, which is why I don't include it in here. I just don't particularly like the skill, especially for PvP. But if you want to include Mana Storm, if you like it, if you find it's very effective, then this is what I would do as the Mana Storm variant. So the same bar 1, and then bar 2 here, you can see I've still got Arcane Beam. I kind of just switched that around over there. Don't ask me why, to be honest. I just don't put Mana Storm in position 1. So it's just my preference. So anyway, we've still got the same skills, just basically switched Arcane Ball for Mana Storm. So where Arcane Ball will do the slowing stuff from range, Mana Storm will be doing the slowing stuff, but close range. The difference is it does a lot more damage. The cooldown is longer, but it does a lot more damage per cast, and also just generally does better damage. So yeah, a bit more damage. That's literally what I said. I said more damage, but you know, in close range, less control. So I personally wouldn't go with this, but this is another very viable setup for PvP. Then, so it's only pretty much just those two that I'm going to show. This one up here is actually not talking about build setup. This is talking about something else. So there are certain other skills which can be very useful, and obviously you can only put 10 skills onto your class, so that causes a bit of a problem if you want to use other skills. And you also notice I didn't include Refract, which I was saying earlier on, Refract is a brilliant PvP skill. So Refract, the way you'd want to use this is actually as an 11th skill. You swap out Archmage in order to do Refract. Now Archmage I would pick because it's such a long cooldown and it's just a buff that you put on, and then you can just swap out the skill. You don't need to reapply it for ages. So use this for Burst or Refract, either one. If you're using those, I would put it in this slot by buffing with Archmage and then swapping out to Burst. With Burst, I do this when you respawn or whatever. You just put Archmage on, or you know, just before you go into combat, put Archmage on, switch it out to Burst, and then go on and start fighting. And then you've got Burst on your setup, and you won't need to reapply Archmage for ages anyway. But yeah, because otherwise it's just really hard to fit Burst into the setup without like reducing the damage or losing something else. So this is how I'd include those skills, and you can do it quite quickly once you practice it. You know, just quickly scroll over the Archmage, hit the button, and then spin across to hit Refract or whatever. You can put it in. So as you can see, I've also added an extra note. So if you've used Protection Bubble or Healing Fountain, then you can pretty much just stand there and tank in most cases. If you're facing someone much tougher than you, then obviously not, but you know, you probably lose anyway, so whatever. But if you use Protection Bubble or Healing Fountain, you can pretty much stand there for a few seconds and survive, and in that time you can actually just switch to Refract and then use Refract and then switch back to the original thing that was there, and you'll survive. You'll then start, you know, reflecting the damage and stuff, and it will work really well. So that's how I use Refract, how I found it to be most effective in PvP. And you can different to Burst, which you want to do before the combat. Refract you can do in the combat. So that's what I would add there. I think that's pretty much it for this video. Going through all the different builds and all the different stuff. I hope everything's been clear to you, and now you know what you want to do with build creation, how to put all the skills into the hotkeys, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the next video is going to be about skill runes, where I go through them and I tell you about which ones to pick. Maybe a bit about the order, but I'll try and stay away from that. And yeah, just include everything current that's in the game, and give you lots of tips on that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching, and if you made it all the way through, then you get a big high five from me.